In this episode, I'm going to talk about the ET paranormal effect on society. This was a question posed by MUFON in their Great Questions project. And so it's chapter 15 in the manuscript I've written, which will not be a book. It's going to remain a manuscript. I'm not going to publish it in print. So the only place you'll hear these ideas will be quite probably on this particular channel. So let me go through some of this. I think you'll find the see where my cursor went. There we go. The ideas, you won't have heard them someplace else, other than here probably. So in the white paper, question 20 that MUFON asked, what would be the effect of an undeniable ET presence on Earth, on society in general? And I suggested that this new ET-caused paradigm would be a shift from believing there is life only here to accepting the idea that there is life everywhere. Now, this has been a few years ago, and thanks to new photographic satellites out there, science is really coming up with the same idea on their own, and they weren't saying it back then, but that's all right. I wasn't first anyway. I'm sure somebody else had said it long before I did. And so what I found interesting along that line is from the Quran. And here's a quote. It says, quote, "In the great Quran, God says, 'Thou shalt see no difference in the creatures of God.'" And this, the quote continues. This is a quote within a quote. That quotation from the writings of the Baha'i Faith continues. In other words, he says, from the ideal standpoint, there is no variation between the creatures of God because they are all created by Him. Now, primarily, of course, we're talking about human beings. This has been pointed out to me multiple times. And that's true. We are talking about human beings. But given that these are writings from an infinite source, I find it difficult to believe that they're talking only about human beings. And therein lies the rub. Okay, all three papers that I've written have been published by MUFON in some form. So in this book, I'm merely using the quotations in this. When I say book now, I mean manuscript, using the quotations from the writings and adding new commentary to make identical points that I made in the white paper. The quotes, in addition to being interesting in and of themselves, add insight into what I was finding before I even began writing the articles for the journal. Likewise, they show the understanding of the universe that I held as strange activity on the farm began to ramp up. So here's some of those quotations. Quote, "From their interaction with other beings, countless forms and realities, innumerable beings have come to exist." That's a quote from the writings. Quote, "Universal existences can be likened and compared to particular ones." I don't know what that means. Comma, quote continues, "For both are subject to one natural order, one universal law, and one divine arrangement." I think that is very important. The quote continues, "For instance, you will find the smallest atoms to be similar in their general structure to the greatest entities in the universe. And it is clear that they have proceeded from one laboratory of might according to one natural order and one universal law." Another quote, "The law of God is one. The evolution of existence is one. The divine order is one. All beings, great and small, are subject to one law and one order." That's a quote. The next quote is a different one. "We find all phenomena subject to an exact order and under control of universal law." End of quote. The idea of one universal law gets mentioned multiple times. This had been brought up by Arnim Birnbaum's article, Hypothesizing an Interstellar Law, which proposed that most UFOs appear to follow a code of conduct. That you can find in the MUFON Journal, June 2019. I would soon write an article in support of this notion, and as you can see, I had already found universal precedent. So I'm thinking really good, off to a good start. Pardon me. To add some perspective to the white paper, I proposed the following. Suppose you're an atheist and you walk into a bar with a priest and a rabbi and discover it's a reptilian bar. Be honest, you three would probably share a table because your shared humanity might make you feel more comfortable, especially if you aren't familiar with the culture of your fellow green and scaly patrons. Now, I don't know if that's racist or phobic in this context. It's too soon in our history to know, isn't it? All right, going on. Speaking of humanity, in a letter to The Hague in 1919, Sir Abdul-Baha said, quote, "Let them see no one as their enemy or as wishing them ill, but think of all mankind, all humankind as their friends, regarding the alien as an intimate, the stranger as a companion, staying free of prejudice, drawing no lines." Abdul-Baha speaking about humans in that context, speaking about humans to humans. Is that the only place that those sentiments can apply? I don't think so. I think they can apply anywhere else that you can think of them applying, because the idea is universal. Knowing that Abdul-Baha knew more about the universe than most people, scientists or not, and also knowing that extraterrestrials and others are real, I can't help but wonder if his use of the word alien isn't an inside joke for experiencers like me and possibly you. What was already happening in this white paper is that with respect to the effect on society, the underlying possibility that mankind includes but is not limited to human beings is brought forward by the notion of one universal law and order in the universe. I don't know about you, but for me, this helps it all make sense without the need to automatically be afraid of the unknown. It is not that unknown if we follow the same law. Now, is it? Here's another quotation from the writings, a long one. "How is it possible to conceive that these stupendous, stellar bodies are not inhabited? Verily they are peopled, but let it be known that the dwellers accord with the elements of their respective spheres. These living beings do not have states of consciousness like unto those who live on the surface of this globe. The power of adaptation and environment molds their bodies and states of consciousness, just as our bodies and minds are suited to our planet. The components of the sun differ from those of this earth. They have discovered that there is a great quantity of radium in the sun. The same element is found on the earth, but in much smaller degree. Beings who inhabit those distant luminous bodies are attuned to the elements that have gone into the composition of their respective spheres." I'm not going to give you the quotes on these because I don't have them handy. When I put this into a manuscript, they all went to the end of the book. So you can search that if you go to the Bahai Reference library online. Going forward, that's a quote from the Bahai writings. Okay, going on. The writings are speaking of stellar bodies being peopled by living beings that are conscious, just as our minds and bodies. That indicates to me that he may not, Abdul-Baha may not be referring to bacteria, viruses, amoeba, etc. That is a lot to unpack right there in that quotation, without getting into beings who inhabit those distant luminous bodies, a possibility that no one else right now has even postulated. Now, I don't think we're contending endlessly with science in that regard, because science hasn't even asked about that question. Going on, another quotation. It was already mentioned that the parts and members of the human body mutually influence one another. For instance, the eyes see and the heart is affected. The ears and the spirit is influenced. The heart finds peace. The thoughts expand. And all the members of the body experience a state of well-being. What a connection and relationship this is. This is all a quote from the writings. And if such relationships, such spiritual influences and effects are found among the various members of the body of man, which is only one particular being among many, then there must assuredly exist both spiritual and material relationships among the countless universal beings. And although our present methods and sciences cannot detect these relationships among the universal beings, their existence is nonetheless clear and indisputable. In sum, all beings, whether universal or particular, are mutually connected in accordance with God's consummate wisdom and mutually influence one another. Were it not so, the quote continues, the all-embracing organization and universal arrangement of existence would become disordered and disrupted. And as all created things are most soundly connected one with another, they are well ordered, arranged, and perfected. This matter deserves close examination and calls for careful attention and deep reflection. End of quote. By this point, the future article that I would write in support of Arnim Birnbaum's idea of a possible universal law was writing itself. Also, the appropriate response to any beings we might encounter is becoming clear, is it not? But when a human is the odd man out in a large group, and of another skin color or culture, many of us, meaning me, don't yet know how to feel fully at ease. Let me read that again. But when a human is the odd man out in a large group of another skin color or culture, many of us, meaning me, don't yet know how to feel fully at ease. Humanity has not resolved these issues for itself, within itself. Star Trek and Star Wars, yes, wars again, what else could it be? Star Peace sounds so boring to human beings. The use of the metaphor of other species to sort of deal with social unity, but the stories are still entombed in good old-fashioned violence. For me, that says we have a ways to go. At this point, in the white paper, I offered an opinion. So this is just my stupid opinion. Here it is. I wrote, quote, "It seems to me careful attention and deep reflection is exactly what the MUFON Essay Initiative is doing." And I supported my opinion with this. Every man must be, quote, "every man must be an investigator for himself. Ideas and beliefs left by his fathers and ancestors as a heritage will not suffice. For adherents to these are but imitations, and imitations have ever been a cause of disappointment and misguidance. Be investigators of reality, that you may attain the verity of truth and life." End of quote. That is exactly what I am up to in this book I wrote. Nothing more, nothing less. That is what I'm trying to do here. As you know what the writings say about, and you know what the writings say about truth. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. MUFON investigates the unknown, usually in the form of spacecraft, submersibles, and unknown entities. But we are also investigators of reality, meaning MUFON. Consider the following, quote, "Be self-sacrificing in the path of God, and wing thy flight unto the heavens of the love of the Abha beauty." By that they mean Baha'u'llah, the glory of God. Quote goes on, For any movement animated by love moveth from the periphery to the center, from space to the day star of the universe. Perchance thou deemest this to be difficult. But I tell thee that such cannot be the case, for when the motivating and guiding power is the divine force of magnetism, it is possible by its aid to traverse time and space easily and swiftly. End of quotation from the writings of Baha'u'llah. Or that's probably Abdul-Baha, actually. Like I say, I don't have the references right in front of me, but you can search that at the reference library, baha'i.org/library. So, going on. So much for those who suggest it is impossible for ET to actually be here. And if they are here, as some of us have noticed, then according to this verse, how bad can they be? In that paper, I basically conclude that if they were exactly like us, we'd all be dead by now. I feel Steve Istall at the factsbyhowtohunt.com may be coming to that conclusion about the forest people. He says that a lot, that if they wanted you dead, you'd be dead. And other bipeds of giant proportions being encountered around the world. Quote, truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. Without truthfulness, progress and success in all the worlds of God are impossible for any soul. When this holy attribute is established in man, all divine qualities will also be acquired. This isn't a battle against the universe we are facing. It is the labor pains of a birth, our own. And where it says, when this holy attribute is established in man, indeed they are talking about human beings. Always. They're always talking about human beings. The question is whether that is exclusively human beings or not. And I think that's an open point. It's up for everybody to make their own mind. Far be it from me to tell you what to think about that. With that sentiment, the white paper was concluded. The effect of an undeniable ET presence on human society, any way you cut it, is that we must change ourselves. That would be true whether ET was here or not, wouldn't it? And that sentiment is the fail-safe of this manuscript and my own application of the writings. Even if I am entirely wrong about everything I'm saying here, if I'm entirely wrong about everything I'm saying here, at the least, someone, possibly you, will have encountered the writings in their pure form, possibly for the first time, and can make of them whatever they will. That's enough. That alone is worth the effort. That's the end of this particular chapter, chapter 15 in this manuscript, and that really sums up the whole thing I'm doing here. Now, there's one other thing I want to mention before we wrap this up. I listened to Brene Brown. One of my two sons turned me on to Brene Brown. Nate did, Dr. Nate House. And she's an investigator and a therapist. She studies vulnerability, all of the sorts of things that people struggle with. And she said, hold on, let me dig out my phone here and get this right. Where's my note? Caring about something passionately is vulnerable. Faith without vulnerability is extremism. Faith is believing in things you can't understand or can't see. And I think Brene Brown makes a terribly important point here. Faith without vulnerability is extremism. And of course, the faith that these writings are from says that we should practice moderation in all things. That doesn't mean you can't be passionate about things, but you can also be moderate at the same time. So it's an art form, isn't it? So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I will be back with another one as soon as I can. It looks like Chapter 16 is the Fall Creek Township UFO flap of 2020. It was very localized. It was localized to this yard right here, but we saw a lot of stuff, and I'll tell you all about it then. Thanks for being here. Bye.
It is. Yay! Did it.